This is the History of New Zealand podcast on the Eat to My Own Beat podcast network. Welcome back to the History of New Zealand podcast. This is episode 13, Vogel Era. In 1870, Julius Vogel introduced his grand go-ahead policy to dispel the slump with increased immigration and overseas borrowing to fund new railways, roads, and telegraph lines. Local banks, notably the Bank of New Zealand and the Colonial Bank of New Zealand, were reckless and permitted a frenzy of private borrowing. Public debt had increased from 7.8 million in 1870 to 18.6 million in 1876. 718 miles, or 1,156 kilometers of railway had been built, with 27 miles, 687 kilometers under construction. 2,000 miles, or 3,200 kilometers, of road had been opened, and electric telegraph lines increased from 699 miles, or 1,125 kilometers, in 1866 to 3,170 miles, or 5,100 kilometers in 1876. A record number of immigrants arrived in 1874. 32,000 of the 44,000 were government assisted. The population rose from 248,000 in 1870 to 399,000 in 1876. Although norms of masculinity were dominant, strong-minded women originated a feminist movement starting in the 1860s. Well before women gained the right to vote in 1893, middle-class women employed the media, especially newspapers, to communicate with each other and to define his priorities. Prominent feminist writers include Mary Taylor, Mary Colocco, and Elizabeth Ellis. The first signs of politicized collective female identity came in the Crusades to pass the Contagious Disease Prevention Act. Feminists by the 1880s were using the rhetoric of white slavery to reveal man's sexual and social oppression of women. By demanding men take responsibility for the right to men to walk the streets safely, New Zealand feminists deployed the rhetoric of white slavery to argue for women's sexual and social freedom. Middle-class women successfully mobilized to stop prostitution, especially during the First World War. Maori women developed their own form of feminism, derived from the Maori nationalism rather than the European sources. In 1893, Elizabeth Yates was elected mayor of Wonhonga, making her the first woman in the British Empire to hold the office. She was an able administrator. She cut the debt, reorganized the fire brigade, and improved roads and sanitation. Many men were hostile, however, and she was defeated for re-election. Hushing argues that after 1890, women were increasingly well organized through the National Council of Women, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Women's International League, and others. By 1910, they were campaigning for peace and campaigning against compulsory military training and conscription. They demanded arbitration and the peaceful resolution of international disputes. Women argued that womanhood, thanks to motherhood, was the repository of superior moral values and concerns, and from their domestic experience, they knew best how to resolve conflicts. Thank you for listening to the History of New Zealand podcast. We're found on YouTube and anywhere else you could find your normal podcasts. Please like, comment, and subscribe, or find us at www.eattomyownbeat.com.